Hey, this is Tim Cummins back with you for another edition of Story Tim, where I tell you some of my favorite stories. This next section that I'm going to be dealing with, I know my first part that I talked to y'all with was from Stories from Africa. This next section I want to talk about is just some of the trips that I've made around the world. I've visited, I don't know, close to 20 countries in my travels throughout my years, and a lot of times I judge the country by two things: their food and their toilets. So I kind of want to have in the next few of these parts in Story Tim talking about some of the worst toilets that I've ever known. The first one I'd like to talk to you about is the toilet that I traveled on when I was going to Nepal from India. I traveled a considerable amount in India and the Uttar Pradesh. When you go from New Delhi up to the northern part of India and up into the Himalayas, into the mountain ranges in Nepal, where I traveled into Kathmandu. And a lot of times you travel on trains. It's a very extensive system throughout Nepal and India in particular. Of course, India was a British colony just like Kenya, where I grew up. So the Brits were crazy about building trains and did an awesome job at that. One of the trains that you ride on is called the mail train. And if you ride on the mail train, that stops at every village along the way. Of course, it's not going anywhere fast, right? In fact, I could jog just about as fast as most of these mail trains would go. You're just piled into these places. You know, I was riding like almost first class, and it was still like 3 or 4 bunks in there, no air conditioning, very hot. And of course, then you had the toilet. Well, you know, the Brits have toilets like we do in the States, where you actually sit down on the toilet, a throne, a porcelain throne, as you will, right? But in most of the world, and especially in the third world, you have squatter toilets. And so when you're in in India and stuff like that, what you will see is this hole in the ground, and then you'll see these like 2 concrete feet, so that you put your feet on the right and left foot. When you squat down, your tailpipe should be pretty much over the hole, right? So that's a pretty easy concept to get, right? But the problem is the Brits made these trains. And so instead of having the squatter toilets like everybody in India is used to, you have the porcelain throne toilets like we here in the States and Europe have, right? So it was in the nighttime, and I had to go to the bathroom. Of course, when you're on a trip, you're always a little bit, scared about leaving your stuff unattended, because most of the time when I traveled, I was by myself. I very rarely traveled with a partner. You kind of would have a loose agreement of people. Sometimes I'd travel with guys from Israel or Australia or Brits, sometimes Germans, that would kind of loosely would travel together, but you were pretty much on your own the whole time. And so I remember I had to go to the bathroom. It was the middle of the night, and I had on my flip-flops, right? So I walked down the carriage to go to the bathroom there. And you have you step into the bathroom because there's like this little 2-inch concrete ledge that you step over when you go through the door into the bathroom. And I thought, well, that's kind of odd. Why am I having to step over this ledge? Well, I stepped over the ledge, and remember, I'm in flip-flops. I stepped over the ledge and directly into about 1.5 inches of urine because people just pissed all over the place, and that's why they'd build the ledge, because they didn't want the pee to go out into the regular thing. So I'm stepping down into this urine, which is absolutely an exquisite feeling. I can tell you that, And so I reach around, I'm trying to find the lights. I turn on the lights, and I look over at the toilet where I'm supposed to sit so that I can, do my thing, right? And the sight that I see chills me to my very core, because nobody was used to actually sitting down on a porcelain throne. So instead, they had climbed up on top of this seat. And if you can imagine, if you were to say, well, I think I'm going to try and use the bathroom, and I'm going to stand up on top of my seat in my toilet in my house, well, the tailpipe doesn't exactly end up pointing down in there into the water. So I go in there when I turn on the light, and the toilet seat is just full of piles of excrement. So I'm like, what am I going to do now? Because I'm certainly not going to sit on that. So basically, I just had to try to climb up on there with the rest of the guys and do my business on there. But that was definitely one of the worst toilets that I've ever been to. And that was another story, Tim.